בשנה הבאה נשב על המרפסת ונזכור ונודדות ילדים בחופשה ישחקו תופסת בין הבית לבין השדות עוד תראה כמה טוב בשנה הבאה עוד תראה כמה טוב יהיה בשנה הבאה נבים האדומים יבשילו עד הערב ויוגשו צוננים לשולחן ורוחות רדומים ייסעו אליהם הדרך עיתונים ישנים בענן עוד תראה כמה טוב יהיה בשנה הבאה עוד תראה כמה טוב יהיה בשנה הבאה בשנה הבאה נפרוס כפות ידיים מול האור הניגר הנפה לבנה תפרוס באולפן והשמש תזרח בתוכן עוד תראה כמה טוב יהיה בשנה הבאה עוד תראה כמה טוב יהיה בשנה הבאה לה 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 בשנה הבאה עוד תראה כמה טוב יהיה בשנה הבאה עוד תראה כמה טוב יהיה בשנה
Hello, everybody who's coming in. It's so great to see you all. In case you didn't notice, please tell everybody who you are. So putting your name and how long you've lived here in Ann Arbor.
Long time. I'm never on camera.
Yeah.
Were we supposed to be typing?
And shortly we will be muting everybody.
Did you type it in?
Yeah. I think I did. I don't know.
Turn, did you
Why
mute?
aren't you muted?
Yeah, unmute, yeah.
I am on mute. I'm on pictures.
I think you are.
54 participants.
Microphone's off.
No,
You should be on mute.
Oh, wait, I'll get
I am on mute. At least as far as I know.
I don't
If
think you
anyone
are.
doesn't know how to mute themselves, we can mute you for you.
There.
I can't do camera.
Carry something.
Hi, Joan.
Oh, that's Hillary.
I mean, hi, Hill.
Hi, Hill.
I see Evie.
Hi, Susie. Hi, Arnie.
Hi, Susie and Arnie.
Yeah,
Love your hair, girl. I hope you're happy.
very happy. Thank you.
Way to go.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
We will be starting momentarily.
Good looking crowd here. Yeah.
Down there.
Okay.
Hi, Dr. Oringer. From
Hi,
the
how are you,
lictors.
Victors?
Hi.
Are
Everybody.
you still here? or
Look,
are you
there's
in
Susie and
Florida?
Arnie.
Finally,
Susie and Arnie.
I look like I'm sitting in a hole. What am I gonna do here?
The lictors.
The other lictors. Hi, Randy from Evie and Helen.
Hi there.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes. Good to
yes.
see
Yeah, we're unmuted.
Carol Amster. Hi, Lictors. What I'm
Hi,
doing.
Carol.
Hi, Carol.
Hi.
Carol.
you. I see the Adlers.
Oh, good. Who is saying me?
Hi, Rita.
Are you here? Are you Carolyn or Carol?
What did you?
Hi, Carol.
Nobody can see me.
I can't see it too. I'm just as short as you are. Nobody's as short as I am. I'm working on it.
Shall we get started? Or
Mhm,
you're letting folks in?
mhm.
I guess we're gonna go.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to the Jewish Federation of Greater Ann Arbor's 2020 Major Gifts event. I'm Randy Milgram, President of Federation. And though we're not able to enjoy the wonderful botanical garden setting this year as we have the past few, I'm delighted just the same to see so many of your faces as we gather by Zoom today for what I'm certain will be a highly informative and entertaining conversation between the multifaceted Gene Sperling and the incomparable Jenny Lewis. We regret that we can't serve you a drink this year, but it is happy hour. So we hope you might have your beverage of choice at hand and that you will sit back, relax, and enjoy. This event is, of course, the first gathering, the official kickoff of our 2021 annual campaign. So let us start it off strong. Shall we drink to that? I'm gonna.
Cheers.
Last year, you were instrumental in raising $1.35 million for the annual community campaign. And through our supplemental campaigns and designated giving, an overall total of just over 1.5 million to support our partners in Israel, in Ann Arbor, and around the world. You enabled us to continue to bolster our organizations and our communities, while at the same time meeting the rising challenges presented by the dual threats of a growing set of security concerns and a persistent pandemic. You will likely be hearing these two words quite a lot this evening, but I am honored to be the first one to say them. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I will spare you for the moment the details of the specific impacts your gifts have had on our communities, because in the next several weeks, we will be sharing the most comprehensive annual report the Federation has produced in some time. It's all digital, and I am very excited about how it turned out. So please keep an eye out for it. Please also note that we're recording this event, so it will be available afterwards to folks who were not able to join us. We also acknowledge that with Zoom, as with any technology, there may be some glitches along the way. Although we've hosted quite a few of these kinds of events over the last several months now, and I will say that our crack staff is pretty good at it. That said, if needed, we will be grateful for your patience. And now, without further delay, I'm delighted to introduce this evening's co-chairs, Tamar Springer and Steve Stancroft. There they are. Tamar and Steve have been in Ann Arbor for 33 years, and as they will share with you, they and their family have enjoyed and benefited from many of the Jewish communal organizations that those of you in this Zoom room have long supported and sustained. Steve's an attorney specializing in consumer protection law, and he has served on the board of Temple Beth Emet. Tamar is a clinical psychologist who has served on the board of Hebrew Day School and has served also most recently on the Federation board. And Tamar, we still miss you. Both are exceedingly thoughtful and generous. And we are so honored that they have agreed to serve in this role this evening. Tamar?
Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. Can everyone hear us? Okay, good. When Steve and I decided to settle in Ann Arbor, we looked for a synagogue that would be a good fit for both of us. I grew up in a large Jewish community outside Boston, and Steve, who's a convert to Judaism, grew up in a small town in northern Michigan where there were no Jews. We decided that a Reform shul would probably be a comfortable choice for both of us, so we joined Temple Beth Emeth. As we had hoped, TBE was a very welcoming community. What we didn't expect and were pleasantly surprised to find was that we would come to feel just as welcome and just as connected to several other Jewish groups in Ann Arbor over the years as we raised our 3 sons here. Our sons attended Hebrew Day School, Habanim Dror Camp Tavor, and they were both campers and counselors at Chabad's Camp Gan Israel. Our family felt very much at home in all of these places. Our Jewish community in Ann Arbor is varied and diverse, but also close and interconnected. That became even clearer to me during the 2 years I recently served on the Federation board. There are many options available to us here for how we express our connection to Judaism, but we're all part of one vibrant Jewish community.
As Jews, we've always recognized the importance of tzedakah and tikkun olam, but there are times during which they become even more vital and necessary. And clearly we are now living during one of those times. This is why we've increased our efforts to assist the work of the Federation in supporting not only the groups Tamar mentioned, but many others as well. If there was ever a time for us to ensure that we maintain the strength and vibrancy of our Jewish community, it is now.
Thank you so much, Tamar and Steve, for those beautiful and inspiring words and for serving as chairs of tonight's event. We are so appreciative of your leadership and philanthropy in our community. For those of you who don't know, I'm Babette Levy-Daskin, and I am proud to be serving in my 4th year as annual campaign chair for the Federation. And I'm excited to share with you a powerful video produced with the help of the Jewish Federations of North America that demonstrates the impact of your support through our annual campaign. Please enjoy and kvel about all that you make possible.
Ready for this? 1, 2, 3.
We did not hear the audio.
Yes, folks, I think we have identified that we can't hear the audio and we are going to work on
Oh,
that.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
I
Yeah.
was full screened, and so I didn't have my chats popping up.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh,
We're going to start, we'll start it all again because we
Yes.
don't want you to miss it and it's very short.
yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. It worked before though, right?
Mm.
I'm gonna stop share. See, this is why we have the thank you for your patience. Are we okay now?
Yes.
לא ראיתי אותך כבר חודש וחצי. מה איתך? איך אתה מרגיש? תודה לאל, הכל בסדר. איזה כיף לראות אותך, אבא. איזה כיף לראות אותך. לראות אתכם זה תרופה. יותר טוב מתרופה.
Wow, once we got that going, that video really told our story. From our impact here in Ann Arbor to the man in the platform in Israel greeting his father, his Abba, for the first time after the COVID lockdown. That really pulled at my heartstrings. And all of it is possible thanks to you. Now it is my pleasure to introduce David Brown, the National Campaign Chair for the Jewish Federations of North America, who has graciously offered to demonstrate the power of your support locally around the world. David hails from Chicago, where he is the immediate past president of the board of directors of the Jewish United Fund of Metropolitan Chicago, and is a member of their executive committee. He is a regular visitor to Israel and active in AIPAC. Fun fact, he has run in the Chicago Marathon 11 times while raising funds for many charitable organizations. A practicing attorney, he is chairman of the premier Chicago-based law firm, Muschellis. David, thank you so much for taking your time to join our Ann Arbor community today.
Babette, thank you very much. And it's great to be with all of you. But I think my real credentials today, Lori and Jeff Barnett, if you want to wave to everybody. And Lori and Jeff Barnett, I've known for a long time. And Jeff, ever since I was born, because I actually hail from Waukegan, Illinois, where the Barnett family and the Brown family have known each other ever since they both moved to Waukegan. I think around 1960, and for the Barnett family, way before that. So to Lori and Jeff, and I understand Mona and Jimmy, Jeff's parents are also there with them. And Tracy, Jeff's younger sister, was one of my closest friends. So I just wanted to give them a shout out. I have also spent some time in Ann Arbor. I don't know if you recollect, but a few years ago, when I was the chair of Israel and overseas for JFNA, I came and visited you to talk about the important needs and our connection from Ann Arbor and North America jewelry to world jewelry. And we had a wonderful opportunity to discuss, to learn, to engage around that. So it's great to be with all of you. And when the request came in to be with you for your Major Gifts kickoff campaign, my immediate word was yes, I'm glad to be with you. And in this day and age of Zoom, obviously it's easier to be there, but I will just tell you, if it was in person, I would love to be there in person with all of you to give you all a hug. So first of all, let me just say, and Randy said it at the beginning a few minutes ago, thank you. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for all that you're doing. You can't accomplish what you accomplish from a federation point of view in your community without you, the leaders. And knowing that you have ambitious goals and that you have significant unmet needs in the community, and that this group is going to stand up and make certain that those needs are fulfilled is heartwarming to me, and I'm sure it's heartwarming to you. And when you think about the impact that each one of you has as a donor to your community, there's only so much that each one of you can do by yourself. But when you combine your monies with all of your friends and families from the same community, you know what you have? You have federation. And that's the power of federation, and that's the power of the collective. But as we know, the issues confronting our Jewish people doesn't sit within a border of Ann Arbor or a border of Chicago or New York or Miami. And the issues are not only national, but they're global. And thus we have the Jewish Federations of North America, where we work together on security, bringing in PPE, the work that we did this year with the SBA on PPP money so that synagogues and agencies and federations can get additional dollars. And the work continues from those items to many other items. And Ann Arbor is a strong part of the Federation community and an integral part. And the reality is, coming from a small town like Waukegan, Illinois, where today, unfortunately, the Jewish community really doesn't exist, don't ever take for granted, as I'm sure you do, that the strength and the power of your community as it sits there today will be there forever. It will only be there because of your work and your leadership. And the future of the Ann Arbor Jewish community, frankly, is in each one of your hands. And so when we talk about community, we talk about the power of the collective, and we talk about raising dollars. We're not doing it just for the sake of trying to raise money for a campaign. It's to meet the needs of the community. It's to meet the needs of you as individual donors. And it's to ensure that your vision of a flourishing Jewish community is met. And so what we'd like to do at this time, in this moment, instead of me being here where I'm going to tell you about what I think, we actually want to hear from each one of you. So as part of this program, we put some questions into the breakout rooms. And yes, you're all going to be swept away in a moment or two. And hopefully the sound will be taken off mute so you can hear one another. But you're going to have an opportunity for a few minutes to share with one another in small groups. Why do you care so much? What do you want for the future of Ann Arbor Jewish community? And what concerns you most? So without any further ado, I'm going to wave the magic wand, and hopefully Rachel will make us go to the right rooms. We'll have an opportunity to further discuss in small groups. And I promise you, we will come back.
And most journalists know that when they'll be as their career unfolds, they learn.
Didn't set it up right.
No, it's all set.
Now, everyone in a meeting. Hi, everyone. Everyone here, or are we still in the main room here? Hi, Carol.
Hi.
Let's see, let me get you into a room here. I'm gonna send you totally randomly to a room and you can talk to everybody.
I don't want to talk. I'd just like to listen to the speaker.
Oh, okay. Well, we're having, here, I can turn my video on so you can see me. We're having just a few minutes to talk in small groups. So it's, yes, so you can go, I'm gonna send you to a room and you can just chat with whoever you want to chat with.
Okay.
And then we'll be back in a few minutes. Steve, can you hear? Oh, hi, Steve. Oh. Hi, Steve and Aaron. We just started the breakout rooms. So, oh, I didn't even look at what time we started. That's okay. I'm going to send you to a room. All right. Now we have, who's this under Jennifer Lewis? Someone just joined us. Oh, and Brad.
No, as a child, we always had pushkas to contribute to the Jewish National Fund or whatever. It was just.
Can you send me to room 10? I got a
Room
different.
10, absolutely.
Thank you.
Stephanie, you're good.
Yeah, it looks like we're still recording. Are we supposed to be?
Oh.
We're back.
Hello.
Hi, Susie and Arnie.
Hi, Carol. Hi, Susie. Hi, Arnie.
Was Lisa on TV? I didn't watch the whole
She
thing.
was- Well, then you missed her because she was on camera the very end. She did not ask a question, but she was in the audience for when he was one-on-one with people, when he stayed longer, and it was a marvelous experience. Hello.
Hi, Bob.
Hi, Bob.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
We all got.
Jessica, if we can get everybody remuted.
That's pretty good.
We all muted?
So Rachel, we're back, right?
I think so. I think so. We're
Everybody's in?
recording.
Clean? So I know that I was in mid-sentence, and I'm guessing some of you were in mid-sentence, and we just had a great discussion in probably what was the best breakout room, which is breakout room number 10. But I want to hear from everybody else, and we asked some pointed questions. Who's prepared to share a little bit from their breakout room, either something they said or something that they heard that was really important as to why they care so much about the Jewish community and why Federation is so important, and why the future, why we need to invest today for the future of the Ann Arbor Jewish community. Anybody want to share?
Since
I
there's a
can
lot of
start.
Go ahead.
What we talked about in our breakout room, and I don't remember our number, is that there's some need for programming across a variety of demographic groups, including teens, young adults, and some of our older members in the community. And it occurred to me that there are opportunities for mixing those groups. So for example, the young professionals could help serve as mentors for the teens in at least one session. And maybe the teens might help with visiting some of the older members of our community. So I think there's eagerness and a sense of urgency for programming across a variety of different age groups within the Ann Arbor community.
It's great. Lador Vador, from one generation pulling up the other and from the other pulling back around. That's fantastic. Thank you, Mark. Who else has some items that they want to share that's meaningful to them? Remember, I'm an attorney, so I'm prepared to call on people. So do we have any volunteers?
I'll go.
Go ahead.
So just to go off the Midor Lador kind of thing. So we were talking in my group that I grew up in Ann Arbor, and I'm not living there currently, but I've been there a lot through the pandemic. And the thing that I tell people when I'm recruiting them to move to Ann Arbor, specifically around Jewish life, is you know, I've been to weddings in the last few years where there are, you know, 11 kids from our day school class of 15. And at my own wedding, we had, you know, 2 tables of kids from my day school class. And that's not counting the kids from my siblings' day school classes. And that's something that's really, really unique to Ann Arbor. And I really credit the Federation with building this ongoing community for kids who are in the day school and in other Jewish programs throughout their childhood, that we've really been able to stick together to continue celebrating Jewish life together. I grew up in the Orthodox Minyan. My friends, you know, Beth Israel, Beth Emeth, independent Chabaras and Minyans. And it's something that I haven't encountered in any other Jewish community I've lived in or worked at. So
Jennifer, thank you for sharing that and a little bit of your story and your history and the power of community building and the power of what that may means, and obviously the impact on your life. And it's this type of story that is meaningful and important. And one of the things from our breakout groups, and Sue, I'm going to call on you from our breakout group, you know, is the importance of not taking any of this for granted. We can't take it for granted about what Jewish life is going to be. Sue, do you want to share from our breakout group?
Sure. It's the example of from my grandparents. It's their stories that you help each other. It's a given. It's natural. It feels good too. And we just, you know, we have new set of twin grandchildren and they're local, and we couldn't be more excited, and thinking about what their life could be in this community is pretty exciting. So we have to make sure it's viable.
It's great. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Sue and Murray. Who else? Anybody else want to share?
Oh, yeah, I'm happy to.
Thank you. Go ahead.
As a donor, I don't have the time and expertise to respond to all the requests for support that we get. And having an organization as professional with such a transparent process for deciding where the needs are greatest at any given time is just a great comfort and resource.
It's great. So again, back to what we talked about is, you know, you as an individual donor can only have so much impact, but when you come together with other members of your community and there's a process of allocation, there's a process of understanding the needs, and there's a process of building community, anything is possible. So thank you for sharing that. All right, any other final thoughts before we sort of move from here? Anybody else want to jump in? Ron? How about you? Excuse me, Randy, how about you from a point of view of the future of the Jewish community? As the head of the Ann Arbor Federation, what is your dream and aspiration for the future of the Ann Arbor Jewish community? Randy, you there? Okay, well, he may have. Okay, can everybody hear me now?
Yes,
All
we
right.
can hear you. And I think in the interest of time, let's see what we got going next.
You got it. So let's wind this up, and I want to just close with the following. The power and the future of the Jewish community rests within all of your hands as the leaders. And when you look at your annual campaign and the numbers that you came up with last year, $1.35 million and an over 1.5 went in total resources, and your ambitious objectives for this year. Again, it's not just to raise money for the sake of raising money. It's to meet the needs of your community and connect to the world Jewry and to ensure that there is a flourishing Jewish life in Ann Arbor. And so what I ask you to do at this time is, I think each one of you were given a pledge card or link. Correct me if I'm right about that. And for some of you, there is an opportunity through the Jewish Federations of North America. We've created a matching fund for human services. And so to the extent that any of you increase your commitment today to the annual campaign, you can designate and you can get back to Eileen or Randy or Babette and talk about this, but there's an opportunity to increase. So if you have $1,000 increase, the Jewish Federations of North America would increase it by an additional $500, or a $5,000 increase would be an additional $2,500 for human services in the Ann Arbor community. So I ask you to take a moment now to think about your commitment to the community of today, to think about the Jewish community of today, but also to think about being an investor in the future of the Ann Arbor Jewish community. And I ask you to consider making an increased gift, a reaching gift, at a time when so many within our community are hurting, at a time when the needs are significant, at a time where the impact upon that COVID has had upon our community can't actually even be understood. Those that are fortunate and those that can, just like me and just like you, we should stand up and we should be counted. And we should say, Hineni, here I am. And on behalf of the Jewish Federations of North America, it is my pleasure to be with all of you. I ask you to now complete your pledge process to the 2021 annual campaign. I appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you. And most importantly, the Ann Arbor Jewish community needs you today. It needs you for the future. Not only your dollars, but also your work and your leadership and your passion. And so that we can leave the Ann Arbor Jewish community in a better and stronger and more vibrant way. I ask you to continue all of your important work and your leadership. And so it's with this that I sign off from you formerly from Waukegan, Illinois, and now Chicago, Illinois. Glad to be with all of you. And thank you for your continued work on behalf of World Jewry. Thank you, everybody.
So we're going to take a few minutes now, not a few minutes, a minute. And Rachel has put up a link on the chat, and also you do have your pledge cards. And yeah, and there are instructions on the screen.
יחד לב אל לב נפתח ונראה את האור שבשמיים. יחד לב אל לב נפתח בתקווה לאהבה. איך שהלב נפתח חובק את העולם ובקריאת עולם נשאיר לאהבה. אם הוא הכל אפשר זה לא מאוחר, השחר ועלה זמן לאהבה. יחד לב אל לב נפתח ונראה.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for having taken a moment to consider how you'd like to support our community at this time. I look forward to having more conversations with you about how your philanthropy and generosity can impact the lives of so many in our community. Thank you, David, for giving our community a lot to think about, for reminding us how important our federation system is, how our global Jewish community is intertwined, and how important our role is in supporting our local and global partners. We hope you enjoy the token of our appreciation we sent your way. I'm now delighted to kick off the next part of our program by introducing this evening's conversation moderator and my good friend, Jenny Lewis. Jenny Lewis was an elementary and middle school teacher for 10 years in California before coming to Ann Arbor in 1994. She completed a doctorate in teacher education at the University of Michigan and is a professor of mathematics education at Wayne State University in Detroit. Recently returned after a 2-year stint as Executive Director of Educator Excellence for the Detroit Public School System. In addition to her important work focused on building systemic efforts to improve instruction in high poverty schools, she has served on the boards of multiple Jewish nonprofits in Ann Arbor and believes strongly that federation is a force for good. Jenny met Jean and Rick Sperling's mother, Doris, Zichrona Livracha, through Doris's work in education in Ann Arbor, most recently through the Family Literacy Institute, which Doris founded, and she jumped at the opportunity to facilitate this conversation with Jean. As for our special guest speaker, I believe there's no better person to introduce him than his own brother, Rick Sperling.
Hello, thank you for having me. I see a lot of familiar faces. I'm honored to introduce my brother. I thank you all for inviting him because I love to hear him talk. We don't get a chance to hear him as much, so thank you so much. My brother is a true Ann Arborite, went to Stone School, Tappan Middle School, Community High School, and played tennis for Pioneer High School, where he was at one point the top tennis player in the state. But also he bowled at Colonial Lanes with my family. Little did we know that in that same complex, they would name the Family Learning Institute Center after our mom, Doris. He was bar mitzvahed at Beth Emeth. He coached my rec department basketball team when he was 16 years old, and I was a bit younger. And after that, he went on to University of Minnesota, where he was the captain of the Minnesota tennis team. And I had one of the oddest experiences of when they tied Michigan for their for the Big Ten championship, actually cheering against Michigan in Ann Arbor. It was a very strange experience for our family. And then after that, attended Wharton Business School, got his law degree at Yale, and went on to do a lot of other politics, was an intern for Carl Levin, worked for many great people, was in the Dukakis campaign, went on to, after that, the Dukakis campaign worked for Mario Cuomo, and then eventually for President Clinton, where he was the chief economic advisor for President Clinton and President Obama, the first and only person to have that role for two different presidents. And in the middle of those, he was an advisor for the TV show The West Wing, where he met his wife, Allison Abner, who was a writer for The West Wing. But if you know Gene, beyond all of his entertainment, he's always been a writer and artist as well. There's not a Mosaic Youth Theater script that I wrote that Gene wasn't my number one editor and source. So thank you so much for our family for inviting him. And I want to welcome you to talk to my brother, Gene Sperling.
Thanks, Rick, for that introduction. I should start out by saying I'm a fangirl of the Sperling family, like big time. So this opportunity was so amazing for me. Rick, I'm a huge fan of Mosaic Youth Theater and actually use your work in the National Day of Racial Healing every year in Detroit for middle schoolers. And Gene, have followed your work for a long time and actually wanted to start off with something that you wrote. I saw the tribute that you wrote about your mother this summer in Medium. And I wanted to start with that. Your byline in that beautiful tribute was, Gene Sperling is the National Economic Advisor to Clinton and Obama, author Economic Dignity, founder Center for Universal Education, dad, husband, and Ann Arbor boy. And we're going to want to hear about all those things in the short time we have tonight together. But I first wanted to hear you talk more about being an Ann Arbor boy. So if you would tell us a little bit about your parents and your siblings, many of us know them. Talk about your experience in the schools that you attended, the legacy that your family has created here, and things about growing up in Ann Arbor that specifically shaped your worldview and your trajectory. So go ahead.
Well, thank you. Can you, first of all, can you hear me okay right now?
Yes.
Well, there's an article that was in the Washtenaw County legal publication about my father that we love to go back and read. And it goes through so many of the things that he did. My parents met on the train to Ann Arbor. So they met even before their first day at Michigan. They met on the train here. They went together all 4 years and skipped graduation day, which is June 13th, 1953, famously the day the Diag plaque from their school is out there, but they skipped it to go get married on that day. And then after 2 years when my dad was in the Honors Justice Department in Ann Arbor, they came back and made Ann Arbor their home. And it was their home till they each passed away at 89 and 86 years old. And in the article of my father, it goes through how he built a very successful law practice here. He was always a public servant. He was the Ypsilanti city attorney. He was the Washtenaw County head and vice chair of the ACLU. He brought many civil rights cases during his time. None was more special to all of us than he won the very, very first case that allowed women to play on a boys' sports team. It was the first time a federal court had ever ruled you had a constitutional right to do that. Now, the interesting part is he's later describing from a friend in high school. He went to James Madison High School in Brooklyn. And he says, I had nobody to rely on for that. I was literally making the legal theory up, he said, except there was one professor from Rutgers who had an article, and I used that article. And his friend says, Larry, that's Kiki Bader, your friend from high school. He says, no, that wasn't Kiki Bader. It was, he looks up, says Ruth Ginsburg. And the friend says, no, Kiki's name was not actually Kiki, it was Ruth. And she married a guy named Ginsburg. So they were actually classmates and knew each other, and she remembered him. But he relied on that case, and he wins the first constitutional case for that. Yet the point of that article was that for all he did, he described himself as the underachiever of the family. And that was less about me and much more about Rick and my mother, who were kind of are such public service heroes. They were, as I said, my mother was a social entrepreneur before people had coined the phrase. And you know, it's kind of amazing, but there are three things: the Ann Arbor Open School System, the Ann Arbor Young People's Theater, and the Family Learning, you know, FLI, Family Learning Institute. And how many people, as a side point to their full-time job, really created three organizations that still last 30, 40 years later. So her contribution to Ann Arbor was enormous. And we were very happy that they named the Family Learning Institute the Doris H. Learning Center. It was something my father wanted to make sure happened. And the fact it's there right where it started, where, as I said, I used to be a pretty good bowler, not a great bowler, pretty good, but right over in that complex. But it's very special for us. Now, Rick, of course, is his mother's child. And so even though he could have gone off and been a successful actor, Rick comes back and decides, he comes back into the Detroit area just as they cut arts education out of the Detroit public schools. Rick sets up, starts teaching classes, starts doing stuff at the Attic Theater, and decides in a total Doris Sperling move, what the hell, I'm going to create something myself. He creates the Mosaic Youth Theater Group of Detroit, which ends up being, seriously, I think over the last 30 years, the most successful youth theater group in the country. 95% of their students have gone to college, even though maybe 60% of the average kid in the public schools does. They've had 5, 6 Tony Award nominees and just had their first Tony Award winner just last year. But beyond that, the amazing things they've all done. And then after Rick creates this, after everything he's done, he's been named Michigander of the Year, he's done all this, he goes and he decides his next chapter is he's going to be the connector between arts excellence and the Detroit public schools and put together all these partnerships. And so just as he's raised the money, just as they're about to have all these partnerships from everything from the Detroit Symphony to everything with young people in Detroit, just as this happens, COVID hits. And I think the interesting thing is at both the Family Learning Institute and at Rick's thing, when it hit, everybody was about to close down. And then as Rick said, what's the initials? You know, WWDD, what would Doris do? Doris would not close down. And so we said, hey, we will help raise the money. You got to keep helping kids now. These are poor kids. They have the worst technology. They have the biggest digital divide. So the Family Learning Institute is still functioning during COVID, inspired by my mother. And then Rick creates a ramp up program which is about getting artists to mentor 5 at a time and then once individually a month, young people who are seeking excellence in theater or music in the Detroit. So I'm so proud of them, and I think our whole family is humbled to what they are still doing in the Ann Arbor, Detroit area. My mother, just through her legacy that we're trying to keep alive, and for Rick. For me, I loved living in Ann Arbor. I was, you know, it's hard to describe in the age of before video games, et cetera, what a big deal Michigan football, Michigan basketball was to me, how much I looked forward to Sundays, because then you had to wait to the whole next day to get the newspaper to see what the stats were, how much people had gained yards, et cetera. There was no way to know before that. My 14-year-old could not comprehend that, but I was, my father would never let us sell tickets above the price. But I had a partner and we famously ran and bought and sold tickets for 8-9 years. I learned a lot about the market that way, supply and demand. And I also somehow managed to be the ball boy of Michigan's basketball team. And I'll just kind of close with that to say that when I was in the White House, a lot of times when you're in the White House, you seek to do big, huge things. And sometimes you maybe were trying to help 20 million people or 40 million people. Maybe you only could help 2 million people or 1 million people or a few 100,000. And so, you know, I would always tell our team, you know, if something happened where maybe you got 100,000 more poor children quality preschool education, but your goal had been 1 million, I would say I think about myself sweeping the floor at halftime at Chrysler Arena, looking up and seeing 14,000 people there, how huge it was. And I would always say, imagine the entire stands filled with children who are now going to get preschool education because of what you did. And then imagine emptying it out and filling it up 7 times. And so whenever I was in the White House, I always tried to use that image of Chrysler Arena so that beneath the numbers, the overwhelming numbers, you never forgot what it meant to help not just tens of millions, but even tens of thousands of people, and to visualize that. And I, both in the Clinton and Obama White House, told the story many times and was often cited back to me by people who I worked with.
That's a great metaphor. And it actually segues perfectly into my next question, which was going to ask you to tell about your entry into the West Wing. First, to hear about the entry into the real West Wing, and then later maybe tell us a little bit about your entry into the TV version.
Well, you know, it was interesting. When I was at Wharton Business School, I was like the only guy there who was trying to go into public policy. And then they gave us a personality test. And I tied for first on entrepreneurial personality. And I thought to myself, but that's crazy. I'm trying to go into public policy. But as I look back, I realized I really was a risk taker at that time. I actually left Wharton Business School to volunteer on the Dukakis campaign. I then packed up and went to Albany and worked for 3 years, was very close to Mario Cuomo and worked for him. And so I took chances. I didn't, even with the degrees I had and the opportunities I had, I was 29 years old on the Dukakis campaign, sleeping on the floor of a unheated apartment so that I could work on a presidential campaign. And when Mario Cuomo didn't run, I thought I was pretty much, my opportunities weren't going to work out for me. But as things turned out, George Stephanopoulos, who I'd worked with in the Dukakis campaign, convinced Bill Clinton that they should offer me the economic policy director job. And so I was in the war room as the economic policy director. And when we won, things had gone very well for me. My relationship with Governor Clinton at the time was very strong. It was the economy stupid campaign, so being head of economic policy was a good thing to be at that time. And that led me to get the job, not as the top economic advisor, but the kind of principal deputy to Bob Rubin as they started the National Economic Council. And because of my relationship with Bill Clinton through the campaign, I was really able to be kind of, at the table for every cabinet meeting, an active participant. But I guess if there was a moment in my life where you really pinched yourself, it was that first moment where you're, sitting in Albany and March of '92, wondering what's next in your life, and 10 months later, you're walking into the West Wing of the White House. I must have been like the first person to go in after inauguration. Somebody asked me, what was it like? And I said, it's kind of like something like a cross between the first day of summer camp and the French Revolution. You're kind of looking for your bunk where you're going to sit, and kind of it really is hitting you. Wow, an entire government is cleared out. All the offices are empty. And so that was for 4 years. And then I was very fortunate. President Clinton chose me to be National Economic Advisor for his second term. And when I left, I thought to myself, well, I want to do meaningful things. And I started the Center for Universal Education that worked on education for the poorest children in the world, obviously inspired by my mother. But I also kind of knew, boy, it'd be fun to do something different, exciting. I'm going to miss being at the White House. And so I worked very, very hard on an in-depth story. And I sent it to Brad Whitford, who I knew, who played Josh Lyman. And he sent it to Tom Shalami, and they said, we really like this. We'll buy this story, but if you'd like, you could come interview to be a consultant. And on my first day, my first moment, I came in, and the first thing I did for my interview was sit down with the writers, and there was an empty place at the table, and I sat down, and the person at my left is now my wife. We've been together almost 20 years. So that was how the real West Wing met the fake West Wing. Or as I say, the real West Wing is the best thing in my professional life, and the fake West Wing ended up leading to the best thing in my personal life.
That's a pretty good dating story, I think.
Yes, yeah.
Really like it. I wanted to turn to your book. I don't know if you know this, Jean, but everyone on this call got a copy of your book as part of the little goodie bag that we got for this event. And so I had a chance to read it, and I want to commend it to everyone else who just got it, I think, because I felt like I was reading a very comprehensive picture of what has led to where we are and all of the different social forces that have led us to the sort of economic moment that we're in. And I wanted to just ask you a couple of questions about that, if that's okay.
Sure.
And I'm also actually, I just posted in the chat for everyone something, the definition that you give of economic dignity. You give a lot of space to defining exactly what you mean by economic dignity in the book. And just to review it for everyone who hasn't read the book yet, it's a 3-part definition. It's the ability to care for your family and be present with them for the meaningful events in their lives, the meaningful moments. It's the capacity to pursue your potential and find a sense of purpose and meaning. And it's the ability to participate in the community, in the economy with respect without being degraded or humiliated at the workplace. It's those 3 ideas. And so I was wondering if you want to expand a little bit on that.
Well, first of all, thank you. It obviously kind of gives me goosebumps to have somebody cite those. So, you know, for myself, being the son of Doris and Larry Sperling, you know, my ideology or philosophy or what camp I was in was really being the son of Doris and Larry Sperling. And I mean that. I mean, I came in as they very much taught us. We were never taught that being Jewish meant you were about helping Jewish people. They both taught very, very strongly from our youngest age. It meant that we were victims of injustice. We were victims of majorities persecuting minorities. And that what it meant to be Jewish was it meant to be a champion for anyone at any time that was in that situation. I'm not saying that's the only definition, but that's how we were raised. We were raised that this wasn't specific. This created a universal obligation to provide justice, fight for justice, and fight for dignity for those who were in the weakest positions, in the most persecuted positions. And my parents were both extremely active in the civil rights movement. And you know us, one of the other, like my dad was on the, I guess it was the school equity board, inspired by my mother, who was, my God, decades before her time on these issues of racial equity in the school, and was probably her driving force for almost everything that she did. So when I come into government, I don't feel, I have never had a cynical view as many people do. The people I have worked for, if you saw them in their most private moments, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Mario Cuomo, Carl Levin, I saw the Marins here, who I know were close friends with Carl. They were all extremely great people. And the people I worked with, I felt shared a common bond for justice. Now, Jennifer, what I did feel is that when you get wrapped up in the economic national debate, it is very easy to take your eye off the ball. Are you a Biden person or a Bernie person? Are you an incrementalist? Are you a bold person? Are you it becomes, or in the economics world, it becomes, do you think the most important thing is GDP growth? Do you think the important thing is median wage? Do you think it's inequality? And so between the politics and the metrics, even somebody with a good heart who is fighting for justice, I think, can again take their eye off what matters most economically. And I also think you lose a lot of the public. People start to feel that economics is fundamentally an area about supply and demand curves and metrics a bit. And I think like you actually get to a point where people feel it's actually inappropriate to bring up those kind of issues of what is your ultimate North Star, as if like, well, you're taking an economics degree, you're not supposed to step back and, talk about what actually matters most. And sometimes it's because if you go there, you go out of the realm of clear metrics. None of us think what matters most can be precisely measured. We don't. All of us probably think having a life partner, children that we love, friends we love, is the single most important thing in life, even though we could not measure it precisely. So what I wanted to do is to come back and say, I think it is actually important for those of us who do economic policy to step back and ask, what is our ultimate North Star for economic policy? And it doesn't mean that you then don't use rigorous economic metrics and analysis, but you ask first. And I thought very much, what is that ultimate economic goal? It's not just we're having a growing economy, because, Saudi Arabia can be growing and it can all be going to a royal family while women are persecuted. Or we can see here where all the gains go to the 1/10%. So what is that ultimate goal? And, coming to those three things was the type of thing I worked on, for months, years, but a lifetime. And I came to feel, and I wanted to write the book when I really locked in that those were the three things and that you had to have them together. And so first, as you said, it's not only the capacity to care for family, but we're people. What's part of the pain of COVID right now? What's one of the most universal pains of COVID right now? It's not being there with people in their most precious moments. We held our dad, we literally held our dad's father when he passed away. All four of us were literally holding his hands. We were Skyping with my mother. It's very painful. How many people weren't there for the birth of a child? Now, here's the truth, though. A lot of this is getting attention because middle and upper middle class people can't do this. A lot of people could never take a day off. They could never be there for their parents. They could never fly across the country. And so when we talk about our aspiration for basic economic security, we shouldn't deny the humanity, which is that it's not just about putting food at the table. It's about being at the table. It's about being at the bedtime story. It's about being at the bedside for these precious moments in life, or at least to have the choice to be able to decide how you want to do those balances. And so I think when you think that way, it's relevant to policy. It makes you care more about paid family leave. It makes you care more about whether Amazon allows people to call home to check on their children or their productivity is being measured too tightly. It affects policy. It affects what kind of minimum wage you have. Do people have to work 90 hours a week for basic security? And if they do, and Martin Luther King used to talk about this, that he would talk about Black women, that in order to fend for their families, they often had to not be there for those moments, and that's not an acceptable economic recipe. Number two, as you say, as you rightly said, we are not just providers. Most of us, almost all of us, want to pursue potential, a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning. And we don't all get to do exactly what we want because, my resume might have included beating Roger Federer at Wimbledon, but I had the choices and the opportunity to pursue my potential, pursue purpose. And then The third is so important because you can't look at these as three separate things. If you do not have protection against domination and humiliation, then the entire pillars of economic dignity crumbles. And so think about this both historically and right now. You don't look at the the coal miners in West Virginia in the 1930s might have felt they were feeding their family, felt okay. They might have felt that they were helping, that they had a sense of purpose, that they were helping power the growth of America. But they were forced to work in humiliation and domination with no rights, no power, no autonomy. The sharecroppers, others. So, and we see this not just as a low income, you can see this as middle income as well. Look at people, look at the Me Too movement. Look at how many people felt that part of working meant subjecting themselves to domination, humiliation, even sexual violence or sexual harassment. So if you don't have that third protection, then your desperation to feed your family, your desperation to pursue potential can actually put you at the mercy of those who would dominate and humiliate you. And much of the rise that starts in the progressive movement is about people realizing what good is it to have a country where you have the right to speak, but you can be dominated and humiliated at work. And that fight continues on right now. It continues on when you see meat workers and poultry workers ordered back to serve us, but without the PPE and the safety. And before we even had COVID, poultry workers were already suffering 7 times the degree of carpal tunnel syndrome, twice the amount of serious injury, and many were forced to wear adult diapers because the line was so fast they couldn't necessarily lean for the bathroom. That was not 1930s. That was the poultry industry, 1 month before COVID hit. And so I wanted to step back and say, it's important to see this and see these as economic issues. And even if I can't put an economic price on somebody being sexually harassed at work or abused or dominated, that has value. That is a part of economic life. And a pursuit of economic dignity puts that front and center, whether or not it fits neatly into an unemployment number or a wage number. So that was my goal. And I hoped with these gray hairs, I was old enough now to step back and write something that I felt that I would have wanted to read when I was 30 years old, that it would have helped me in keeping my eye on the ball amidst all the politics and internal divisions that happen in the American political economic discussion.
I feel like actually one of the great contributions of your book is that the repeated return to the notion of an economic vision that's shaped explicitly by values. And one of the values that undergirds this 3-part definition of economic diversity is the notion that all humans have absolute value or intrinsic value. And you quote Michael Sandel, the philosopher, saying that, but you also bring the voice of Cesar Chavez and Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Chief Justice Earl Warren, all saying sort of the unending value of human life. And it's that vision that sort of guides your view of economic dignity. And I couldn't help but hear the echo of the Torah portion that was read yesterday in synagogue, not to give this a religious spin in any way, but the echo of the Genesis story that was read yesterday, where we learn that humans were created in God's image. And from that, one of the greatest Jewish thinkers of our time, Rabbi Yitz Greenberg, has written that from that idea, the idea that Jews are created, that all people are created in God's image, we learn that people therefore have infinite worth. And that sort of, I felt like that echoed what I was reading in your book about this idea of humans having absolute and intrinsic value. And I wonder if you want to expand a little on that.
Well, yes. And I mean, as I wrote this book, I had to decide, do I try to write this book and, be from a do I try to put as much philosophy in possible? I decided more that I needed to speak from my own voice. I'm not a PhD philosopher, but I did try to draw from both history and where it's powerful. And obviously the famous definition of Kant is that no person should be treated as if they are just a means to an end and not an end in themselves. Now, look, we're all means, of course. Any of us working, we're means to a certain goal of having a great nonprofit or a great synagogue or a good company or teaching. I mean, but so having your work be a means to an end is, of course, that's basic. But the notion to only be treated as a means is dehumanizing. And one of the things that I read just in time to get into the book was Matthew Desmond, who many of you might have read his wonderful book on housing and other issues. He also talked in the 1619 Project about where micro-efficiency of people came. This idea of, let's look at whether my worker, how many hamburgers did they get out? How many Amazon packages did they, put in? That can be traced back to slavery. It was traced back to cotton. And in other words, that started at a time when you were having the most horrific abuse of dignity, not looking at people as people, but only purely as means to high efficiency. And so therefore it became acceptable. But even now, you see more of it. People call it the electronic whip. We can now measure you. We can now measure better how you're doing. And it seems like, oh, isn't this great? We're going to make sure we get high level of productivity from all our worker. Now we're not going to just judge whether Jennifer or Jean is the slacker or hard worker. We can measure it precisely. But of course, that's not really a perspective of people, because people have to go to the bathroom. People get depressed. People go through heartbreak in their lives. People need to call home to see how a child is doing. That's just fundamental to being a person. You ask, stories told at my father's funeral, he always took our call. Yeah, but he was a busy guy. He was a successful lawyer, but he was his own boss. He always took his call. That's widely seen as an admirable trait of a parent. But even at work, they always had time for their kid. And yet, when you construct a work world where that's not possible, that is a kind of dehumanization. I think that when you kind of say, oh, here's a new policy practice, and it's going to be good for 80% of us. Well, what about the other 20%? Again, if it's just like objects, then you say, aha, you're net up plus. But I think a lot of the feeling in the country that people are abused and forgotten. And this isn't just about the kind of white male Trump voters. This is, of course, about the African-American, workers, the essential workers that now are appreciating more, that the sense that you were expendable, that maybe something was good for the company as a whole, good for profits, but you were not considered a person in there. It was okay if you suffered, if it was good overall. And I think that is not something we need to accept. The gentleman who wrote the book, The Technology Trap, talks about how we tend to mock people who were feared technology would cost them their job. Don't they know you can't stop it? Well, you're right, you can't stop it. But, it is the truth. So when they talk about, people fighting against the machines in the, British industrial era, they said, well, most of those families did not recover for 3 generations. But economists say, oh, that was all ridiculous. Look at the tremendous growth. Well, but if you look at the dignity of those communities, of those families, then you have failed them, and they have suffered terrible harm, and they don't feel a part of the country or valued as a human being. Now, does that mean you stop machines and the internet? Of course not. You can't stop technology. Does that mean you make sure you're a country where people have health care, where they have unemployment checks that allow them to pay the bills, that they have second and third chances? Yes. So I think that it is not just spiritual. I think it translates into how we look at particular policies, what we allow in the workplace, how much trade-offs we're willing to make, how much we compensate and help people who are hurting or suffering from economic change. And if you can forgive me for going on, I have to say that, not to take away from the Genesis reading, but my favorite reading in all this is still Martin Luther King, March 18th, at the Memphis sanitation workers strike. And this is, of course, 2-3 weeks before he's killed. And this is where he makes the very famous speech where he says, all labor has dignity. And people quote that all the time, but it's worth looking at the particulars. First of all, that the George Floyds of those moments were Eckel Cole and Robert Walker. They were 30 and 36 years old, and they were crushed to death by a defective sanitation truck that they all knew was defective. All the people who worked there were Black men. There was no regard for their life, and their children weren't going to get anything. And when people marched to, and when King came up and saw the march, the signs people were holding didn't say 8% more on my COLA. It said, I am a man. And when King speaks in this moment that just foresaw the COVID era, he said, he didn't just say, right before he says all labor has dignity, he says, someday our nation will realize that the sanitation worker is every bit as critical to our public health as the physician. If without both doing their job, we do not have health. And then he says another line in there. He says, you know, he's fought so hard for all these civil rights, but what good is it to sit at an integrated lunch counter if you cannot buy your family a meal? Mm-hmm. And those two moments are, I mean, that is him in March 18th, 1968, foreseeing our moment, because we do now realize, you know, remember, it's not that COVID changed anything. It's just shined a spotlight. Exactly why was it? Why would I ever have thought that the women who were caring for my mother in her last year and a half were not incredibly valuable in our lives? Why would you possibly think the person you entrust your child to when they're 2 or 3 years old are not important in your life? Why would you think that the person who picks the food that allows you to survive is not essential in your life? COVID just shined a spotlight on that reality that King mentioned about the value of all people's work and their labor and their importance for us. And right now, we've been great at applauding and cheering, but to go to his lunch counter, if we come out of this crisis and we don't have a fundamental change, then we will be like letting people have we'll be like great applause, pats on the back, but you still don't have paid sick leave if you get sick. You still can't take time off for your child, even while you're risking your life for our parent. And we will miss this moment. We will miss turning this COVID moment into a true moment of reaching an economic dignity compact.
I'm going to ask everybody who has questions for Jean to post them in the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to ask you one last question that picks up on what you just were saying. You actually, at one point in the book, argue for something you call double dignity jobs. And actually, your mother's caregivers were among the people that you would call doing a double dignity job. And you argue that we could take some of the resources that we will have from automated jobs, from robots doing work, from AI, artificial intelligence, plus some taxes from the top 1%, or actually 0.1 of 1% of Americans who make enough money to take some of those resources and actually put them towards what you call double dignity jobs. And those are things like caregivers, childcare, early education teachers, college advisors, sheltered work situations for people with disabilities, job navigators, those kinds of things. By the way, I had to note as an educator that a lot of those were in education. And I wanted, before people start asking questions, if you wanted to talk a little bit about those kinds of jobs and how you imagine they'll be funded.
Well, one of the issues I was taking on a little bit was, you know, even before COVID, there was a large issue about, will the robots take over? Will AI take over? Will there just be less demand for jobs? And some people were saying, oh yes, there'll just be less things for people to do for jobs. And their answer was, well, let's just send everybody a check. We'll send everybody a universal basic income check. That's our solution. And I wanted to say, first of all, the idea that we don't need more jobs in our economy, if we don't need more jobs, if it did work out, which it never has before, but if it did work out that this time was different and robots and AIs meant there was less need for some jobs in the private sector, to me, that would free up an enormous amount of jobs to fill the gaps in I think the dignity gaps in our country. We have many of us have somebody in our life who might be dealing with a child who has a serious disability or IDD, whatever. And we see this heroic effort by these parents. Heroic, transforms their lives, and they will do anything for their child to give them every opportunity. And when I see that, I think I admire the parents, but I think what kind of society are we where that's just where they're on their own? Why don't we have people whose jobs would be, to help families in those situations, help those young people in those situations, help young adults who have disabilities live independently, find jobs, find work, and not having the people who do this incredibly valuable work make $10, $12 an hour. Obviously, we're going to have more of that need with more of an aging society. But I wanted to say, we have all these places we need more work. So if it was to turn out that we had the wealth, we had both less jobs needed in the private sector and wealth, I wouldn't just write everybody a check. I would create millions of these double dignity jobs. And when I call them double dignity, it's the idea that you would upgrade these jobs. This is what the SEIU, this is what the people like Mary Kay Henry, this is what Joe Biden, this is what Ai-jen Poo, this is what they're talking about, which is the idea that these jobs that are so valuable get very low training, they get skills, they get very low pay, they have high turnover. And so the idea is that if you increase the dignity of those jobs by giving them more recognition, more skill, more pay, you would actually get people more devoted to those jobs. You'd pull more people in, and they would have a dignified job, doing even a better job of providing dignity to other people. So my view was, boy, I don't want to just, I think that I think we have huge gaps in needs for jobs in our country. And as I said, and as you said, some of them might be, look, how many of us, if one of our kids has some issue with school, can hire a tutor? And we know it helps. We know the individualized attention helps. But it's so okay that if you're not upper middle class, you can't. Those are jobs not being filled. People coming out of prison, they need so much help just to get a start, not forever, just for a year and a half, get on their feet, find that first job. People, there are so many needs. So my view is, if we have needs for jobs, if we have people unemployed, I would rather take our resources and help millions and millions of people have careers and dignified jobs, actually filling needs in our society that I think right now go terribly unmet.
So I'm going to read a couple of the questions that have come up in the chat. You might be able to see them also. A couple of people following what you were just talking about, ask about your opinion about a guaranteed minimum income. And you actually write about that in the book, but this might be a chance to address that. Malcolm Cohen says, wait, wouldn't a guaranteed minimum wage accomplish what you're describing? And Julia Good asks about a guaranteed minimum income, which you reference Andrew Yang's idea. So there are a couple questions about that. Roberta Tankanow asks if you think unions today have a sense of humanity for workers versus economic. There's a question about whether you want to share an interesting or funny anecdote from working on the West Wing. So I want to put all those questions out to you and let you pick one or a couple that you'd like to address in our last minutes together.
So let me take the issue of guaranteed income for a second, what that means, because I think it means different things to different people. I very much admire Andrew Yang, his heart, his compassion. He very much is for, like I am, a more values-based economics. What I'm not for is the idea that everybody on this call needs to be sent $12,000 a year. That's what universal basic income is. It's that everybody gets $12,000 a year here. I mean, I would feel terrible for that to be the use of those resources. And that, by the way, would cost about $3 trillion a year. I mean, if you support, let's say, universal health care, that is enough resources to have absolute universal health care for every American. So it's a huge amount, and it's not a guaranteed income. It's just a universal grant that is the same to every single person. Now, to me, a guaranteed income would mean if you are contributing, if you are working, let's make sure you have a dignity wage. Let's make sure you have universal health care. Let's make sure you have childcare and housing affordability. That to me is saying, I want to guarantee that everybody who is working is able to work with dignity, raise their family with dignity, retire with dignity. And then I think it's fine for us to say, yes, my cousin Dara, who spends full time with a child who, has a type of autism that makes it very difficult for him. It's a full-time job. Should we provide more assistance to maybe people who are unpaid care positions? Well, I wouldn't say to every single person who's doing anything at any time. I don't feel like Rick and I should have been paid money to help care for our parents, but we could expand more the kind of service and contribution and giving jobs. So to me, a guaranteed income means that we have a compact as a country. And when people are doing their part, we make sure they can live with dignity. And hey, if you're Gene Sperling right now and you're living in Santa Monica and you're consulting and your wife's TV writing, we don't need $12,000 each. We need that money to go to people who really need it, to fight systemic discrimination, to help more people with disabilities, live independently and find their way to pursue with purpose and potential, or have full-time jobs or part-time jobs, whatever. So I support some versions of what a guaranteed income, when it's about making sure that all of us are lifted up to a degree of economic dignity. I just don't believe that the only way to do that is to send every single person every month a check, whether they need the money or not, when that same money could be used to creating millions of more caregivers, teachers, job navigators, all the things I'm talking about. So that's my view. And I know not everybody shares it, but it's not a view that's less progressive. It's just saying, I want to use those resources to actually give people jobs and meaning and purpose and the double dignity of both having jobs and filling dignity gaps in other people who aren't maybe as fortunate as many of us on this call. On the union side, I mean, look, I think that, I'm very pro-union. And I think that, and I think it's very interesting that young people today have more favorable to unions than almost any generation. I think that is because people do want more voice and control in their workplace. But the question's an interesting one, which is, do you know, are some unions, you know, rightly fighting for more wages and benefits? Should they be fighting for more qualitative things? I couldn't give a singular answer. I think it's a question that is, you know, you'd have to talk to different union leaders about. I think somebody like Mary Kay Henry, who runs the SEIU, is very much focused on the fight for 15, the actual dignity and control of work, having paid leave, et cetera. But look, I think all of us can think a little bit more about, should we be fighting more to help workers make transitions? But I don't, you know, I feel like the best thing is to have a very strong union economy and a stronger safety net, and the two can work together well. So for example, in Sweden, they do a better job of saying, hey, Gene, you're going to lose your job in 4 months. Instead of waiting till you're devastated, let's start working with you now. And that's a combination of unions negotiating that, and it's a combination of their public policies. But I do think from a dignity perspective, there is more focus in other countries on making sure unemployment does not lead to a downward spiral that affects your whole life. And I think where you see that being done better, it is usually a combination of a stronger policy security net and a stronger union movement than we have. Let's see, what else did I? Oops,
We have two light questions. Choose one to end with. One is a funny or interesting anecdote from the West Wing TV show. The other would be, where would we run into you when you come to visit in Ann Arbor?
Well, let's see, I think I have a lot of good West Wing anecdotes. So I need to think of a couple, but I'll tell you one that's a little bit topical. One of the things Aaron Sorkin loved that I told him was when they were doing the episode Debate Camp. I explained to him how interesting it was to be in debate camp and the preparation, because your staff is kind of mooting you. They're asking you these really hard questions. And of course, if somebody in your staff asks a kind of mean-spirited question, you know, like, you know, let's say everybody thinks you know, come into work too late in the morning, and your staffer was mooting you, and they said, so what do you say about everybody who says you come in late, you know, to the office every day? Well, somebody might think, well, are you asking that to prepare me, or is that what you think? And that dynamic can happen in that situation. And I can remember a time where Paul Begala asked Bill Clinton an incredibly mean-spirited question, pretending to be a reporter. And we're in the middle of practice. And Bill Clinton kind of stops and says, you really think that, Paul? And George Stephanopoulos comes and goes, Governor, he's just pretending to be a mean reporter. But Sorkin loved that idea, though, that in debate prep, that there could be this potential for kind of passive aggressive behavior by the staffers asking hard questions. And so he puts in having Sam Seaborn ask Bartlett a really hard question about an issue where clearly Bartlett had gone the other way that Seaborn is. And he has Bartlett kind of get mad. So that was kind of just a recent thing as I've been looking at the debates that I've been thinking about, that it was fun sometimes to bring to them, you know, these insights that they would become attracted to, and then put in the show. And you know, it's the thing that's amazing for me now is I'm watching it episode by episode with my daughter. Now, if you think about it, when I was in even the Obama administration, she was still pretty young, 7, 8, 9. So as we're watching it now, it's such a lovely thing because now she's able to be like, oh, wow, you were in a meeting like that. You were at Camp David. You were in the Situation Room. And, so it's great, kind of wonderful for us to be able to kind of relive that a little now that she's older. And it's still fun for me sometimes when I see that line come up where it's a line that I came up with. I'm most proud of that fact that I have 4 episodes where I actually got partial writing credit, but there's other times where just a line comes up. There was a line I actually said in the White House that I told them that they liked, which was, we were doing the estate tax. And I said, oh, I finally figured out the difference between Democrats and Republicans. Democrats are for millionaires and Republicans are for billionaires. And they actually have Toby say that line, precisely. So, those are really kind of special things to see. But I'll stop with the last thing, which is the most bizarre, which is we're doing in season 5, we're doing the budget showdown. And of course, since I'd lived through the government shutdowns, I was giving all the information. And I talked about how there's times where like the president doesn't get their call returned right away. And they thought that was fascinating. So we came up with this idea that Bartlett would actually walk up to the Hill, that he would walk there and put them on the spot. And so I was kind of proud of that. Now, can you imagine a few years later, I'm in the Oval Office with Obama and he's called Speaker Boehner and Speaker Boehner has not returned his call. And he says, you know what, maybe I should be like Bartlett was in the West Wing and just walk up there. And I couldn't help it. I had to literally stop and say, oh my God, I can't believe you just said that. We'd gone through the shutdown. I helped come up with it. And now I'm in the Oval and you're mentioning that. And I remember Obama looked at me like, yeah, that was a little inappropriate to kind of mention in the middle of a policy meeting, but I kind of understand why, you felt compelled to do it. So anyways, that I guess was life imitating art, imitating life, or a few different rounds of it.
For sure. It's been such a delight speaking with you. And I feel like we get to continue the fun by keeping, we all have the book. We get to go back into these ideas and really enjoy them. I want to turn it over to Eileen Freed. But first, just thank you, really, Jean. This has been terrific. Thank you.
I have to say one thing. I think I saw Carol Amster on this call.
Yes, she's on the call.
And her husband took me to a Yankee Tiger game with her sons. And Whitey Ford, famous Yankee pitcher, left the game after the first inning and he never pitched again. And I've always bragged all those years that I saw Whitey Ford pitch his last inning. And he just passed away and I was just thinking about them. And so anyways, hello, and you were just in my thoughts.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jenny. And thank you, Jean, for allowing us to join you in this enlightening and enjoyable conversation. We're really so grateful for your generosity of time and for your thoughtful insights. We hope you enjoy the tokens of appreciation we've sent your way direct from Ann Arbor. Once we wrap up, Jean, you're welcome to stay on and let everybody know where we would run into you in Ann Arbor. But again, thank you so much. I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to Tamar and Steve for their leadership and to the Federation volunteer and professional team led by our campaign chair, Babette Levy-Daskin, and our new communications and development manager, Rachel Wall, who worked so hard to make this very different kind of Major Gifts event so special and so successful. I also want to extend a thank you and welcome to leaders from our community partner organizations. Given the Zoom format and that we've run a little over, we're not going to personally recognize you, but that's the beauty of Zoom because we can all go into gallery view and see who's here. And thank you so much for joining us. We're so grateful for your support and your collaboration, ensuring a strong, caring, and vibrant Jewish community. I want to thank all of you for joining us on Zoom to share this evening. On behalf of a very grateful community, I thank you for your generosity, your dedication, and your leadership. We look forward to having many conversations with you about how we can continue and expand the positive energy for the benefit of our community. I want to give you a heads up about our next community event taking place Sunday, November 8th at 10 a.m. Our Maimonides Committee will be presenting a race for the COVID vaccine. Our panel of experts will explore vaccine development, testing, and policy considerations, and registration information is available on our website. As was mentioned earlier, we can't offer you a dessert reception, but we can offer you some time to schmooze. So to facilitate this, we'll be randomly, again, putting anyone who chooses to remain on this Zoom call into some breakout rooms. You can easily move to a different group if you want by exiting your breakout room, and the person who's coordinating the breakouts can move you somewhere else. But we hope you'll take this opportunity to meet someone new or catch up with some old friends. So we'll give everybody about a minute. We're gonna, I'll tell you what's coming up next, but so we'll give everybody about a minute before we do the breakout. So if you don't want to participate, you don't have to. And if you do want to participate, we know who's here. As we leave, we will be sharing one more song. It was the song most frequently entered on our event registration form. So as we thank you and wish you good health and spirits and wish you a Lila Tov, we also hope you will enjoy the dulcet tones of Hail to the Victors. Thank you so much.